Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today, listeners, I've got a really lovely lady. She's a first-time guest on our show. She's called Catherine Hickem. She's an author and psychotherapist. And we're going to be talking about the very, very interesting and intriguing topic of parent and adult-child relationships. So welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be with you and your audience.
So, parent and adult-child relationships, you know what? This really touched my heart because I'm in a situation whereby I've been estranged from my two adult children for about 15 years now. And I have no idea how to, or whether I actually need to keep trying to reconcile this situation. So I'm really intrigued to have this conversation. So just tell us a little bit about yourself, Catherine, and how you've come to actually specialize in this particular area.
All right. I am, well, let me start by telling you who I am first as a person. I think I was created to be a safe harbor for people, where people could dock to when the storms of life came, and they would dock to me, we would work together, and then they would get what they needed, and they would go back out into the seas of life. And my entire career, which expands over 40 years, I've either been a psychotherapist, I've been an executive coach in corporations, I've been a family coach, I have written a couple of books, but it's always been about relationships. So whether you're leading, whether you're in a family, whether it's your children, it's about connection. It's about who we are in that relationship. And so that's my passion. My passion is to help people know how to bring the very best version of themselves to a relationship, and to be able to get needs met in the context of relationships. It's not just that we love people, it's that we also need to know how to connect to people. And everybody's very different, and that makes it more complicated, right? It's not like we can use one thing for everyone. So that's my heart. And I went through a season of infertility, and then I adopted my son. And 5 months later, I got pregnant with my daughter. And so I had two children within 14 months. And so there began my journey in parenting. And my son was quite complicated, and it took me a while to figure him out. And he's 41, and I'm still trying to figure him out. So, it's always a work in progress. But what I learned early on is that parenting is work, and it can be incredibly rewarding, but you're always having to learn and grow and evolve in order to parent the way they need to be parented. And so I specialize in that as a therapist, and I began working with parents all across the country. And as my children got older, I began to realize there was nothing out there for parents of adult children. And I started paying attention, and I had this one moment where my daughter's friend came home with her from college, or he was visiting from college, and Tiffany, my daughter, had left the room. She was about 21 at this point, and Jason, this young man, was also about the same age. And he said to me, "Mrs. Hickem, did you know that Tiffany is the only friend that I have who is the same in front of her parents as she is behind their back?" And I said, "No, Jason." I said, "It never dawned on me to think that way." I said, "Tell me more." I said, "Are you the same?" And he said, "No, ma'am, I'm the same." I said, "Can you tell me what that's about?" And he said, "I learned a long time ago about what my parents expect." And he said, "If I'm not who they want me to be, my mother cries and my dad gets mad."
Whoa. Yeah.
So when I go home, I become who they want me to be. And when I walk out the door, I go back to being myself. And in that moment, when my heart just broke, because I thought, he has learned he's not enough for just being who he is, that his life is now spent on trying to make them happy, or to not disappoint them, or to be who they want them to be, instead of them learning who he really is. And from that moment on, I became very, very focused on paying attention to parent-adult-child relationships, because I I can tell you the research now backs up what he says, that over 50% of adult children do not share their lives with their parents in terms of like what's really going on. We now have a 27% estrangement rate in the United States. And the topics that were most concerning to me, like for instance, mental health, if a child has a mental health problem, they're not telling their parents. Over 53% will not tell their parents ever that they have a mental health problem. And my question, of course, is, well, where do they go? Who do they talk to? And so what I've seen in recent years has just been this incredible division and this incredible pain in families. And so this is the reason why I started parenting adult children today, is because I want to change the dialogue on that. I want us to start talking about what are the things that we need to be doing to be communicating with each other, right? Because the minute we stop communicating, that's a sign of immaturity on someone's part. Now, that doesn't mean we can't have boundaries. Don't get me wrong. Some families have to have boundaries because there has been a severity of abuse, right? And
Yes.
it might be the communication is limited. But what I'm seeing today is there's a disagreement and people walk away from the relationship, but they don't really communicate what that's about, or they don't bring in a third party to try to help fix it or whatever. So I just want to be able to say there's solutions out here. Like we don't have to do the all or nothing. We don't have to be severe. We can try to work things out. And I realize some people have tried, right? I realize some people are making efforts. But I will also tell you, I run into a lot of people who just made the decision, I'm done, and walked away. And I think the sad part for me too is that if grandchildren see their mom or dad cut off a parent, what that adult child doesn't understand is that they've just given their children permission to do likewise when
Yeah.
their children become grown.
Mm.
And we're going to repeat patterns that are very painful and very hurtful. And I just want to do what I can to stop that because I don't think that's healthy.
That's brilliant work that you're doing. I mean, my situation is that my daughters were nearly 17 and 19 when I had the conversation with them that me and their dad were going to separate and divorce, and that was my decision. And he wasn't and isn't a bad father or husband. It was just because I felt the relationship had run its course. So I don't know whether age is a factor when things like that happen, but it was probably the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to them in their lives. And since that time, they've just literally wanted nothing to do with me. And I know that I could have handled things better because at the time, obviously, I think I didn't realize that I'd had literally years to come to terms with, I suppose, grieving the loss of that relationship. And they hadn't, you know, when I dropped the bombshell, so to speak, and neither had he. So I think I come across as quite, looking back, quite firm and emotionless about it all. And as I say, I don't think they've ever forgiven me for that.
Well, and what we know about that is that there's some real hurt, right? Anytime people don't forgive, anytime people cut people off, there's fear involved. And so the real question is, what's the fear, right? What's the fear behind the behavior? And there's always going to be fear behind any kind of decision to estrange or to step away. And you made a really good point, Lynn, that is the issue of forgiveness is a really significant issue. And when we don't forgive, we're actually hostage to the very people we're not forgiving.
Mm,
And so therefore, I'm sad for them about what it may be costing them because it's not just costing you, it's costing them too, right? And so that's the thing we got to work on the healing part. And I think your insight about, they hadn't had the opportunity to grieve all that you had grieved, and nor should they have, because that was inappropriate for you to have dumped all your marriage issues on them. And you, by not doing it, it caught them probably off guard. And so they felt blindsided, right? And
yeah.
so, but they probably at that time, and even maybe now, didn't have the maturity to know how to deal with being blindsided. And so, and that's understandable. You know, when they're 17 and 19, the brain is still developing. And so, you know, it's hard. Life is hard. And, you know, I divorced when my children were in their late 20s. And so they were more prepared, I think, for it, which it still didn't make it easy for one of my children because I had never dawned on me that I would divorce, but we were able to get through it. But it does take work and it does take time. And you know, it's every family's different and every situation's different. So there isn't a magic formula, right,
No.
on how to deal with it. But it not communicating, it would be healthier for all parties if we could talk about forgiving or talking about asking for forgiveness or say, you know, I for them to hear you be able to say you're sorry or when our adult children can hear us say we are so sorry for the pain that we have caused you or I've caused you and I would do anything to heal that. You know, at that point, that's it's on them to decide what they want to do with it. But unfortunately, sometimes it takes a while for adult children to come to the reality that they're only punishing themselves when they can't let go.
Yeah,
And
I think you're absolutely spot on. And I've always left the door open, by the way. I've always tried to connect with them in terms of sending birthday, Christmas cards, and, trying to reach out whenever I, can seize an opportunity to communicate. But they've literally blocked me on everything, in terms of emails, phones, social media. And up until recently, they've both moved, and so even now, their new addresses, I don't even know those to even send cards anymore. So it's just like, oh. But I've never done that back to them. I've never cut off any opportunity for them to be able to contact me. I've always left that open, and I've always said in any cards and contact, that I love them and the door's always open. But obviously, to now, it's been to no avail.
mhm. And that's so painful. And I'm really sorry that you've walked that journey because it's not an easy journey. It's very lonely and it's very heavy on your heart, I'm sure, because they're your children. And there's a place in our heart that no one else can ever take like our children do. So I can just only imagine how painful that must be. So I'm sorry that that's happened.
I've got my brother who keeps in touch with them, and I also, until my mother passed away a few years ago, she was in touch with them. But every time they try to broach the subject or mediate, they risk, you know, the fact that my girls will become estranged from them as well, as a result of my name being brought up. So it's just one of those situations where they had to tread lightly.
No, I can appreciate that. I can totally understand and appreciate that. And it doesn't make it easy on anyone, right? And
No.
at all. So it's hard.
Oh, I just in the last couple of years, I've just had to put my hands up and think, okay, that's it now. I can't. I'm not in a situation where I can send them any more cards because they've changed address and told my brother not to forward on their new addresses. So it's just like, okay, it's up to I suppose the universe now to decide whether I'm going to ever have the reconciliation I'm open to.
Right. There comes a moment in time where in a situation such as yours that it's out of your hands, right? And the one thing you can continue to do for you is to continue to take care of yourself, be healthy, grow, and make your life as meaningful as you possibly can, and create connections with people who want you in their world. And you don't, I'm always a big believer. We don't have to have lots of people in our world. We just need a couple of people in our world to have our village. We can have a small village, and that can be enough, right? We don't have to have a big village, but it's important that we do have connection because we were not created neurologically to live in isolation. We were created to live in community. And we get to decide how big or small that community is. But it is important that we realize our value isn't dependent upon whether our children agree or disagree with us. Our
Exactly.
value is that we are. So you're valuable, period.
Thank you for that. And I agree with you. It's quality over quantity in terms of, like you say, the community or village that I've got around me. It's more important to me to have people who I feel aligned with than have numerous people I'm not really aligned with.
Yeah. No, I understand that completely. That's absolutely healthy.
Yeah, and I think, as long as you've got that inner peace and know that you've done your best, um, you know, as a parent, I think we can all say, we're not faultless. We could have done things differently at different times. But I feel as though on the whole, I was and they'll admit this as well, that I was a good mother to them up until that point where, I did have that conversation with them. So I really know that there were better ways I could have communicated things after that point, and better ways I could have dealt with things, but I'm not perfect, and I don't think anybody can say they are, can they?
No, no, there's no such thing as that. And in the fact, our goal really should never be perfectionism because first of all, it's not even real. Two, perfectionism is about how things look and what people will think, right? There is this concept of, healthy striving, right? And that's internalized excellence. Brene Brown, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but
Yes,
she
yeah,
talks
yeah.
about that. And, this idea that there's nothing wrong with any of us striving to be the very best version of ourselves, right? To constantly be learning and growing and evolving into, you know, a really healthy human being. But that doesn't mean we're going to get it right every time. We are going to make mistakes. And, we are going to um, hurt people that we don't intend to hurt, but we will because we're going to have bad days and bad moments. The real question is, how do we recover from them? How do we handle them? And are we able to, quote, take responsibility and ownership? I was 15 the first time my dad told me he was sorry for something. And I was 18 the first time my mother ever said she was sorry. And they were not good role models of humility in that way. I saw how humble they were with everyone in the world, but when it came to me, I did not see my mom and dad ever say that until I was, almost an adult. So, you know, it's something I've had to work on as a person to say, I'm sorry, because it just didn't come natural. It wasn't the definition of normal in our home because I grew up with perfectionists.
Hmm.
So um, I just remember one day I was in graduate school and I read this article called "The Gift of Imperfection." No, it wasn't. No, it says "The Deception of Perfection." And I remember thinking, I just breathed this deep, deep sigh of relief. I was like, thank goodness that this isn't even true, that you can even possibly attain it. And I just remember breathing this deep, thinking, okay, I don't have to worry about that anymore. And it was very freeing. And I try my best, but I can tell you, I fail and I make mistakes and I have to pick myself up off the floor and apologize and move on. So there's something freeing when we know we don't have to be perfect, but we can continue to grow.
Exactly. I did see, and this is latterly in my life, a fantastic interview with somebody who got a billionaire father, and she'd also made her own billion as well herself. Obviously, she's got that cushion of support, I suppose, in the background. But one of the things that she said that I thought was really interesting was that her father had always gathered her and her siblings around the table every day and asked what mistakes or failures they'd had that day. And then on the back of that, asking them what lessons they'd learned. And she says, we just grew up never fearing making mistakes or having failures because we knew that, they were just lessons in life, which I thought was
Yeah.
great.
No, my gut is you're talking about Sarah Blakely and for Spanx because
Yes,
that's one of my favorite stories because she really learned to be fearless by recognizing that mistakes are a part of being healthy and growing. That's how you grow. And I really think that culturally speaking, we have made major errors in the parenting world for the last 30 years by not letting our children learn consequences early. We've been too busy rewarding them for showing up instead of them having to learn what it means to fall and get up on their own.
Mm.
And I spent many years in working with parenting under 18 before I transferred over the over 18 focus. And that was one of my biggest concerns 20 something years ago, was that I was seeing that parents were just so um, risk averse when letting their children learn something. And that, our best teachers are often our mistakes. And I remember I had a son who would test the limits all the time, and I constantly had to let him learn the consequences. And I said to him one day, I said, can you help me understand? This is going to be the consequence when you make this decision. And I will always carry out the choice that you make. So if you make the choice, it's going to have a consequence. I'm going to always carry it out. But can you help me understand why you make those choices? And I'll never forget what he said to me. He says, Mom, sometimes I just have to learn it for myself.
Yes.
And I said, you know what? That's fair. And I said, just know I'm going to always be clear with benefits and consequences. I will give you whatever you choose, but no, I will give you whatever you choose. You know,
Yeah, I
and
like that.
so, and he did. I mean, he tested me all the way up to his last. I mean, he was in high school and he was actually 18. He was still living at home, and I had a curfew. It was 1 o'clock, and he called, and the rule was you don't call me at 11 o'clock to ask for an extended curfew. If you want, we talk about something before you. So one Friday night, he calls me. It's 11:30, and he says, "Hey, Mom, I need an extension on the curfew." And I said, "I can't give it to you because it violates our agreement." He says, "Oh, Mom, come on, please, please, please." I said, "No, son." I said, "You have an hour and a half before you're supposed to be home. What is it that's going to prohibit you from being able to get home by 1 o'clock?" And there was this dead silence, right? I live in South Florida. And he said, "Well, Mom," he says, "the truth is I'm stuck on a boat out in the ocean and I can't get back until 12:30." I said, "Really?"
Mhm.
I said, "Well, let me give you a new rule. Anytime you leave the continental country, I need to know about it, even if it's on a boat." I said, "Because if something was to happen to the boat, it would never dawn on me to go stand by the shore to look for your body. So I need you to tell me." So I said, "No." And in my house with Taylor, to get his attention, it was $1 a minute. For every minute you were late, you had to give me $1. And so he walked in at 1:40 and handed me $40.
Excellent. I love that. That's a
And I
great
was like,
lesson.
and we had a great conversation. We ended up staying up another hour and talking. But it was like, I wasn't mad. I wasn't upset. I was just very clear and I was just very consistent. But he never did it again.
Yeah, I was mindful actually around this similar situations where it comes to my daughter's choices of friends. And you know how you have sort of some friends that you think they're a bad influence, and other friends that you think, oh, she's great or whatever. And there was definitely a bad influence on my elder daughter situation with a friendship, and a bad influence situation with my younger daughter. And they both learnt valuable lessons, because I thought, well, it's no good me trying to separate them and telling her she shouldn't be friends with these particular girls, but let them, like you said, learn the consequences of that relationship. And I think, if I remember rightly, for one of them, it was they got caught shoplifting and both got taken to the police station. And even though she wasn't the one that was shoplifting my daughter, it was this particular bad influence friend. It made her realize for herself she didn't want to be associated with that friend after that. So yeah, it's some good life lessons that you can let your own children learn for themselves. Eventually it will happen, won't it? That what you suspect might happen happens, but they learn it for themselves rather than forcing the issue.
Right. And with adult children, it's no longer our role to teach them anything anymore. We can be a guide if they invite us in or they ask us our opinion, but it's not our job to quote, instill, enforce, direct, control. Those days are gone. So the biggest challenge, right, for most of us as parents of adult children is that the role does a 180. and no one told us how to, quote, do the 180, right? We could find thousands of resources on how to do parenting under 18 and deal with all kinds of issues and challenges. But this is a significant shift for us as parents to do parenting differently. And in fact, the science says that when our children leave home, they adapt very quickly. Their brain adapts very quickly to the freedom and the independence. Our brain does not adapt to the loss of the caretaking role as a parent very quickly. It takes our brains some time to shift into a new gear because we've done it 24/7 for at least 18 years here in the United States. So we need to give ourselves some grace. Whatever part of the country we're in, our brains are all still formed very similarly neurologically. So we need to give ourselves some grace to understand this is a new skill. This is a new way of parenting. We can't bring the skills that we once used over into this next season. It's a whole new skill set. And that's why it's really important for us to be able to recognize we have work to do when they become adults.
Excellent. I'm loving this conversation, Catherine, but I realise that, there is a limit to the time we've got available on this particular episode. But for the benefit of our audience, what would be the best contact information that they could use to get connected with you?
Probably the thing where they would get the most access to what we're doing is on TikTok, Parenting Adult Children with the number 2 and the letter D. Parenting Adult Children 2 and the letter D. And
Excellent.
That would probably be the best way to reach us.
I love the fact that you're on TikTok. I am too. So that's great. And finally, what extra words of wisdom would you like to share in terms of this question around parent and adult-child relationships, just to finish sharing your wisdom for this particular episode?
So let me just give some words of comfort. Your success as a parent isn't based upon how your children turn out. You're not responsible for their successes, and you're not responsible for their mistakes. You're responsible for how you show up as a parent in the relationship, because parenting is about you and who you are as you relate to your children. So give yourself some grace, give yourself some, release yourself from all the shoulds, ought tos, have tos of what you could have done. You did the best you could at the time that you did it. There isn't a person around who couldn't say, if I knew then what I knew now, that we may not make some very different choices. But we have to move forward. So my encouragement is be the very best version of you that you can become. So that way, when you're with them, you're a responder, you're not a reactor. And they can see that you live in integrity by being peaceful yourself. And that will make you someone that they'll want to be a part of. They want to look you up and seek you out because you're healthy yourself.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Catherine. It's been a really fabulous conversation. I've really enjoyed having you on, and hopefully we'll have you on and do a few more shows together.
That would be great. And thank you so much, Lyn, for this privilege to be with you.
Okay, folks, that's going to be it for today. And I just want to remind you that true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group 2 Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's lyn@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.
This episode was brought to you by Disruptive Media, helping bold entrepreneurs stand out through podcasting, video, and social content. Visit disruptivemedia.co.uk to learn more.